Hi, my name's Nyema Hermiston. I'm from Australia and I'm a registered nurse, homeopath, naturopath, and I recently completed a degree in science. And during that degree, I discovered a lot of research on the causes of autism. And it seemed to me that parents and families with autism in their experience would be interested in this material. So I've put together this webinar and I'm sure that you will find something in it of interest to you, and I hope you enjoy it.
So good morning everyone, and on behalf of the New South Wales branch of the Australian Homeopathic Association, welcome to this half-day seminar, The Causes of Autism in Plain Sight. Our presenter is Nyema Hermiston. Nyema's background, she's had many careers. She was a nurse and a naturopath and then homeopath. She's been practicing natural medicine since 1992, but about 6-7 years ago, undertook to do a science degree, and what she's going to be sharing with us is part of the research from her honours program. Last November at the Australian Homeopathic Association National Conference, Nyema presented this information, but it was really popular and there just wasn't enough time for her to share all that she had. So hopefully this morning, or in this session, we'll really hear the full details of Nyema's research. So I ask you to join me in welcoming Nyema.
Well, thank you all for coming on a Sunday morning, and a nice one at that.
My journey with autism really began in Sydney in 2008 when I attended one of the first MIND conferences, MIND meaning metabolic, immunologic, neurologic, digestive and developmental disorders. So they had a few paediatricians from the United States, and Dr. Elizabeth Mumper put this slide up of a non-verbal child whose parents had been told, 9-year-old boy, his parents have been told, he's got an IQ of 80, put him in care and get on with your life. And she treated him and he recovered. And it turned out that he had an IQ of 140. And so 100 is an average IQ. And so this is emblazoned in my brain about this is what could be happening to so many other children out there. So I've nursed my smouldering discontent, and here I am. So as Zan said, I happened to get an opportunity during COVID to do a science degree, and I'd always wondered why I never did get a direct degree. So there I was, and at the end of the course, we were asked to do a project, a defined topic on how homeopathy could be applied, and to make a research project out of it. And I chose autism, which I wouldn't call defined, but and it was way too big for what I needed, but I absolutely loved every second of it. So these are the topics I'm going to talk about today. A few statistics, a treatment overview, what affects neurodevelopment, risk factors, toxic influences, medications in pregnancy, reducing autism risk, avoiding toxins, and chemo prevention, and homeopathic methodologies. So there isn't a lot of specific homeopathic content in terms of prescribing remedies, but there is in terms of understanding what you're treating, and that's the emphasis of today. So, what is autism? Now, most of you know this. It's a neurodevelopmental condition. It can be mild, moderate, severe. Lifelong effects, recognised from early childhood. Social interaction and communication are a problem, and there's the stims, or the repeated behaviours. What concerns me about what I hear about discussions about autism is that it's becoming normalised and it's becoming accepted. and people are expecting to have autistic kids. And I hear conversations, they go, oh yeah, he's autistic, as if with this sagely affect of, I know what that is. And it's like, it's just enormously common now. And people diagnose, treat in one swipe. They say, that kid's got that, and they need that. And we have kids coming into the clinic, and you probably do too, to say, my child's been, I was told to put my child on medication. That might have been for ADHD. But in one fell swoop, this child has been assessed, diagnosed and treated. And here's the parent sitting in front of us. The ADHD diagnoses, as far as I'm concerned, are on the same spectrum, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. We don't talk about other diseases with such familiarity, like, oh yeah, he's got Parkinson's. So it's quite interesting. So the incidence. So between 2015 and 2018 in Australia, the incidence increased by 25%. In Australia, as of 2022, 1 in 70 have autism. And in the United States, it's 1 in 36. And the American statistics have come from the Centers of Disease Control, which is the international authority that collates and collects data about all diseases all over the world. And if you want to know anything about any disease, that's where you go. So they've listed this statistic with no explanation about why or what to do about it. There's a lot of information about how it's dealt with, but not in terms of if it was an infectious disease, would be these are the precautions, etc., etc. Their explanation on the CDC is it's unclear exactly of how much this increase is due to a broader definition of ASD and better efforts in diagnoses. This is what the graph looks like. 317% increase since 2000. When a family receives a diagnosis of autism, a family's life is changed forever. If they're lucky, the child will be mildly autistic. These are the ones that you see in the documentaries who have responded well to behavioural therapy, and everybody's so pleased. We don't see the moderately severe autistic children because they're too severe, severely disturbed to come out, and the severe autistic children are usually having a lot of care. Family life, even with mild autism, has to adjust to the needs of the child. They may have extreme anxieties, food and sleep difficulties. They've got to get therapies. They've got to limit how much they go out. Visits to and from families, between families, are restricted or absent. There's a lot of family stress because the kids go and stay with grandma, and grandma gives them all these lovely ice creams and treats, and it's very stressful. One parent has to stay at home at least to look after the child. The financial strain for care is huge, and 80% of marriages don't survive. Schools and teachers aren't coping. Massive stress in the education system. Did anyone see Four Corners a couple of weeks ago, where they had the school refusers? It was talking about children who are not truant, but they can't go to school because they're so anxious. So their parents are homeschooling. They've got to stop work. So an autism diagnosis isn't like being diagnosed with epilepsy or even a severe disease. It's like a global impact it has. Some families have 2, 3, and 4 children who are autistic. The days of having one autistic child are over. And this paper I put in, it was retracted after being on PubMed for 2 years. These researchers talked about the impact, the societal cost of autism. So the medico-economic burdens of autism are absolutely enormous. There's no test to diagnose it. There's no recognised treatment, no clear guidelines of management, no single authority for parents to turn to, and limited support available. Why this catastrophic increase in the incidence of autism? Outside of the research community, who's asking this question? Has anyone here heard someone saying, why is kids becoming autistic? It's just not answered or asked. There's an air of acceptance, and I sense an air of hopelessness and despair. I would like to say that I'm very much just being the newsreader today. None of what I'm presenting to you is original. I'm just reiterating the research to you, and what I have done is I've put it all together and joined some dots. I encourage you not to take my word for what I'm presenting, and the information is on PubMed for anyone to find, or Google Scholar. So mercury was removed from vaccines, childhood vaccines, in 2001. It's still present in flu vaccines, and the autism rates continue to rise. There is a focus often on vaccines causing autism, but unvaccinated children are getting autism too. I have one in my own family. Why do only some children become autistic? And what factors are present in children who are not autistic? And that's really the hub of what this presentation is. Standard explanation on autism websites is there is no single known cause of autism. Science suggests that there are several likely causes, and there are strong links to developmental and genetic factors. This is the message parents doing research are getting. Sometimes the environment is mentioned, and it's very generalised, and the information is focused on management, not treatment, and never recovery. And we're going to have a look at this statement later in the presentation. Now, this is my treatment map. In putting together this chart, I really wanted to get a big picture of all the treatment options from all different parts of the health system that are available to parents. I had a look at literally thousands of studies because I wanted a full understanding of what the treatment options were that are being offered to parents, and there are just so many of them. So this graph is based on about 700 studies. It's thorough, but it's not comprehensive. The first 2 panels on the left, the pink and turquoise, are all behavioural therapy, which have been enormously helpful for so many autistic children. And many lives have been transformed by successful behavioural therapy. It is, however, more suited to children with mild autism. Children with moderate and severe autism may not be able to tolerate the intensity of this type of treatment, and their mental function may not be as it needs to be to benefit. This type of therapy is excellent if there's good family support.
if at least one parent is able to be at home and maintain the treatment, and it works best when it's repeated over a period of time. The cost of this is very high, and some countries have payment schemes. In Australia, we have the NDIS, where some children are able to access so they can have this type of therapy. And you can see that there's a real range of aspects suited to the child. Applied behavioural analysis is the big one that all the research has been really done on. And it can make a huge difference in a family's life. You can see that there's social skills training, communication, emotional modifications, and there is a lot of digital training available too, which is great because it's not usually a problem to get a child to sit in front of a computer. The next panel, the pink one, is for very early intervention. This is the best time to start behavioural modification therapy. However, not all children are diagnosed before they're 3 years old. But you can see this is more about sensory, stimulating the senses, speech, sound, vision. And so this is incredibly helpful for so many children. The people delivering behavioural therapy are going to be your psychologists, speech therapists, and specially trained behavioural therapists. And the blue panel is the medical therapies. The people who deliver this therapy are paediatricians and medical doctors. So you can see that neuroregulation is a big part, where they're stimulating the brain with various techniques. There's digestive therapy using the hormone gastrin. So many autistic children have severe gut issues. Stem cell therapy you may have heard of, and sleep therapy, so very important, using melatonin and tryptophan, sleep stimulating agents. So many autistic children are unable to fall asleep and stay asleep, and of course this creates in itself a huge problem on a daily basis for families. There are a lot of medications being given to autistic children in the medical area, and some of these are for adult diseases and psychiatric conditions. These are given as what's called off-label prescriptions, where there has been no approval for the prescription of a certain medication for a certain condition. But anecdotally, there has been some benefit, although I must say it does look a little experimental in this section when you're looking at Alzheimer's medications and antidepressants for young children. The problem with giving children medication to alter their brain chemistry is that their brains are still developing until they're 25 years old. So at this stage, we really don't know what the true impact of those medications are. The next orange panel is biomedical and naturopathic treatment. So these treatments address the physical health issues that affect the mental function of autistic children. The people who deliver these treatments are integrative doctors and naturopaths, and they deal with nutritional deficiencies, they address toxic influences, they implement gut therapy, calming techniques, and diet is such a huge part of the biomedical treatment. You've no doubt heard of the gluten-free, dairy-free diets, and some children really do benefit amazingly from this intervention. But you can see that there's a whole range, and really in biomedical treatment you're dealing with a child's physiology. And in these cases you can actually test and measure what levels of a nutrient a child has or how much toxicity there is. So this kind of treatment is quite targeted because it's so easy to assess, test and measure the impact of treatment. Treating the gut is also very big in biomedical treatments because the gut influences the brain, and so many children have gut issues, and when they are resolved, you do see a real improvement in the behaviour of the child. You can also see that there are some novel therapies here. In animal, equine, canine, children do respond so well to animals, and it helps to bring them out of themselves and engage them in a way they might not otherwise be. There's also a performing in clowning and music, games, motorised elephant therapy, I'm not sure what that one is, theatre intervention, and weighted vest to help ground the child. And biomedical treatment is not generally recognised by orthodox medicine. So according to orthodox medicine, that the children's brains need to be developed without considering the physiological metabolic influences that that child might be under. And on the far right, you've got complementary medicine in the green panel. This includes a range of complementary therapies, acupuncture, herbal medicine, homeopathy, mind therapies, and a number of body therapies, osteopathy, oxygen therapy, craniosacral. This is the area I'm most familiar with, and I have to say I have seen enormous improvement and benefit in autistic children having some of these therapies. Oftentimes, children receive a combination of these. They may be having homeopathy, and then they'll have hyperbaric oxygen therapy along with some behavioural therapy. So it's more likely to get a benefit when you see a combination of these modalities. Recoveries do occur, and there are some very well documented on the mind.org website, where parents tell about their children's journeys to recovery. From my understanding, most autistic children do not get to access the biomedical and complementary medicine areas of treatment because they are not considered valid by orthodox medicine.
So, the practitioner's dilemma. This is actually a research that has done the Longitudinal European Autism Project, or LEAP. And so they're trying to find out what the biomarkers that autistic children have, and to try and find a reason why children have autism. And they're saying the tremendous clinical and etiological, that means the causation, diversity among individuals with ASD has been a major obstacle to the development of new treatments. This is a universal problem. Where do anyone not thought this when an autistic kid has come into clinic? Where do you start treatment? And why is this child autistic? 65 researchers on this program, on this paper. The ability to find a treatment for autism is limited by a poor understanding of what's causing it. And the other thing is that there's all these differing presentations because of the comorbidities or other diseases that they have. They can have eczema, allergies, frequent ear infections, seizures, feeding problems, tantrums. They can be non-verbal, crippling anxieties, or a combination of some of those. The parent's dilemma. Why is my child autistic? They're given no explanation. What do I do now? And without exception, they're told there's no cure. They've got no idea how this has happened to them. There's a desperate search for a solution. It's a treatment maze for them. It's, from what I can see, it's a matter of luck if they find a helpful treatment. Only some people can afford biomedical treatment. The stress is through the roof, and they're looking for any sign of hope. And these are the parents that we see. What affects neurodevelopment? Turns out quite a lot. If you go online to just ask Google what affects neurodevelopment of children, your screen will light up. There are thousands of studies on the databases. So I'm going to show you what I found. This is a surprise. Air pollution is now the 6th leading cause of death globally. And this is an article from the Sydney Morning Herald. And this here, this little alphabet diagnosis, ADHD, you could replace it with any alphabet diagnosis that I'll talk about in the next slide. So there are a massive amount of studies on the detrimental effects of air pollution in the general population, including studies on the impacts on children. So, alphabet kids diagnoses. Some of you probably know all of these. I haven't included them all, but ADD, ADHD, I haven't heard of childhood integrative disorder. This is my favourite one, PDD-NOS, pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. It's like, there's something wrong with this kid and I've got no idea what it is. OCD, we know, ODD, defiance disorder, and the PANDAS and PANS are associated with streptococcus and these with other microbes. So at least there's something to treat there. So in my mind, after doing this work, the diagnosis is irrelevant in that this child has disrupted neurodevelopment and we have to find out what it is and what to do about it. So here are other everyday exposures, long grisly list. Now, to do papers on all of these, you could do a weekend seminar on papers just on the toxic exposures that affect, in our case, children. So in air pollution, you've got a real mix. You've got all the vehicle emissions, depending on where you live, industrial emissions. In that there are chemicals, who knows what, all your heavy metals, microplastics, that's another whole big story, and the heavy metals. So they are sweeping around in the air that we're all breathing, depending to a greater or less extent, depending on where we live. So herbicides, weed killers, right throughout the food chain, can't avoid them. Home garden chemicals for pests, sprays and powders. I realised when I was doing this, I don't know what those sprays and powders are because I don't ever get them myself. But take a look through Bunnings sometime. Personal care chemicals. So there's so many chemicals in there, but the big one is perfume, parfum. Just means it's a chemical. So when you buy your beautifully perfumed garbage bags or your loo paper or whatever it is that's your washing powder, it's chemicals you're breathing in. And I know how long they last because if I have my clothes laundered with a perfumed washing powder, I can still smell it 3 washes later. So it's very strong. Cleaning products, chlorine bleach is not really great. Beware of miracle cleaning agents. You can just rub that on and the stain will go away. I'm sure it's wonderful, but it's also wonderfully toxic. Household emissions, we'll talk about this some more. Gas cooking, heating, off-gassing new furniture, etc. The kitchen, oh yes, your lemon-scented dishwashing liquid. Non-stick cookware, fluoride we're going to talk about. That's in a lot of things, and plastics. will elaborate on some of those.
So in homeopathy, a child affected with a sustaining cause of toxin is an obstacle to cure. And so if you look for this when a child you've given the best selected remedy and they improve and then they relapse, you want to think of sustaining causes. Everyone know what glyphosate is? It's safe, right? You can go in and choose the type of glyphosate you get from any hardware store. It's used freely in horticulture. People believe it's safe. It disrupts healthy gut bacteria. In particular, you get a proliferation of Clostridia, which in turn causes leaky gut, and it affects the healthy gut-brain axis. So basically, you've got cells from your gut in your brain and cells from your brain in your gut, and they communicate. So this is a systematic review where it's a large collection of good quality research papers. And once again, there's this consensus about the multifactorial causes of autism. It's like they're saying there's so many different causes, we can't define it. So glyphosate reduces the beneficial bacteria in the gut. It influences the gut-brain axis and boosts the growth, they measured it in the study, of Clostridium bacteria in autistic toddlers. Gut bacteria impacts neurological development. The disorder, you get behaviour and potential psychiatric disorders. Here's a microbiome mapping done earlier this year. And here's your Clostridium species through the roof. Now that is a normal gut bacteria, but if it proliferates, then all these other ones here are reduced. And this Akkermansia is actually a new promising probiotic. And you can see here, it's quite high as well. So my understanding of that is that this beneficial bacteria has proliferated in response to that and these other ones being diminished. And this Dr. Jason Horelick is a PhD in gut problems, and he works out of Tasmania. So Dr. Stephanie Seneff is a very vocal person about glyphosate, and this is the book she's written. She's a senior research scientist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and you would have to say that toxicities and shouting out the problem has been her life's work. She says that the toxic symptoms of glyphosate mimic the symptoms of autism, which is interesting. So from homeopath's point of view, approving would be quite interesting. I don't know who would want to do it, but now, this is a test to measure the level of glyphosate in the system. So this is my result that I had done a few years ago. So I've been drinking reverse osmosis water for 15 odd years. I didn't count. I've been on organic food, growing my own produce for at least 15 years without being fanatical, like I do go out to restaurants. And the toxic 95th percentile here is 2.5, and my score is almost half of that. So I found that quite alarming. I thought I'd be way down here. So you could expect to see on someone who just eats, normal food, and especially children, because they're designed to absorb nutrients, It would be so interesting to see what their levels are. So that's one of the organic acid tests that we did.
Fluoridated water. The aim of fluoridating water is to strengthen tooth enamel and prevent tooth decay, which is, of course, very important. However, fluoride added to drinking water affects all body tissues and not the target tissue or the tooth enamel alone. And this in itself is a problem because those body tissues are affected, and in this particular case, the brain. Unfortunately, it's not possible to control the dose of fluoride that each individual gets. For example, if you're someone who does a lot of physical activity, or you're a diabetic, or you have a kidney issue or other health issue, fluoride is going to affect those people in different ways from someone of normal health. And also, there are other sources of fluoride that we consume. Most people use fluoridated toothpaste. It comes in food because if food is manufactured with fluoridated water, that's another natural source. And also beverages like tea and coffee and mechanically deboned meat. So there are many sources of fluoride in our environment. Most concerningly, nobody ever has their fluoride level tested, so the levels are not routinely monitored in any population. So someone could have an accumulation of fluoride, which would be affecting their brain and neurodevelopment, and we wouldn't necessarily know. This study below, The Untold Story of Fluoridation, revisiting the changing perception of fluoridation, is well worth having a look at. Another concern about fluoridated water is that natural fluoride found in the environment and many water supplies is a form of fluoride called calcium fluoride. However, fluoridated water is fluoridated with man-made products, which are byproducts of the manufacture of aluminium, iron ore, and phosphate fertilizers. So it's not difficult to imagine how these compounds are going to be affecting our body systems in quite a different way from the naturally found calcium fluoride. The impacts on health are quite significant. Dental fluorosis is a symptom of excess fluoride in early life, and these are when you see people with mottled white teeth. And the good news is that for people who are concerned about tooth decay, the tooth enamel can be strengthened with local applications. That can be fluoridated toothpaste, or it can be a fluoride treatment at your dentist. Most concerningly, fluoride does impact the IQ, and it does this by depleting iodine levels and negatively affecting thyroid function. And there are multiple studies on the impacts of fluoride on neurodevelopment. And this, of course, is a real concern and one more toxic impact on the developing brain.
The benefit to tooth enamel can be acquired by just putting fluoride on the teeth locally, like fluoridated toothpaste could be enough. This is Phyllis Mullinex, who was the world-renowned pharmacist and toxicologist working for the Forsyth Dental Center associated with Harvard University. And she was recruited to research fluoride in the late 80s and early 1990s. And she concluded that the risks far exceeded the hoped-for benefit. And what she found in mice, fluoride concentrated in the brain before birth caused hyperactivity in the offspring. And if it concentrated in the brain after birth, it was hypoactive activity. Then she got the sack. And she wrote a lot about it. And there's an interview there that if you just go onto Fluoride Alert website, you'll find everything you need to know about it. So this is the picture of fluoride toxicity. This was actually in an 85-year-old woman. And there it is. This was done in 2020, this test, and in two years later, it's lowered. So obviously, if you're 85 and you know you've got fluoride in your brain, it's not an ideal situation. In children, you don't actually see the accumulation on their tests, but you do see iodine lower and you do see vitamin D lower. Next toxin is triclosan. Have you all heard of triclosan? So it's the main ingredient in antibacterial products. So the classic one is hand wash, but it's actually in over 2,000 personal care products. It's in your dishwashing liquid. It flows into waterways and soils, accumulates in water. Triclosan was registered as a pesticide in 1969. And there's a rising demand for better hygiene, which is driving the expansion of this industry. And this study here describes 2,500 children between 2 and 7 years old, and over 50% of the children with autism showed higher levels in their systems. Plastics. This is a sort of a more recent concern that we see in the media. The depth of the problem is still being discovered, but there's a lot of literature out on it now. Endocrine disruption is important because it does affect neural development. So what happens is there's a field of study called psychoneuroimmunology. So there's the immune system, there's the endocrine system, and the nervous system, and they all communicate through transmitters, hormones, and neuropeptides. So we can't really look at one system without knowing that it's affecting the other. So when you hear endocrine disruption, you think, oh, well, I'm worried about my child's neurodevelopment. It will be affected by endocrine disruptors. 240,000 particles of plastic in a 1 litre bottled water. You can't see them. Just imagine putting a plastic baby bottle into the microwave, and globally we create 515 billion litres of bottled water every year. PFAS, you might have heard of PFOS. There are a lot of acronyms for them, but basically they're per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances. There's thousands and thousands of them. They are manufactured in 2 different facilities in America, and they've successfully contaminated the world so that 98% of the global population has PFAS in their blood. So they're in fire retardants, all your nice crease-resistant clothing, your Scotch Guard, anything that's stain, grease and waterproof, the fire retardants in your carpets, fabric, furniture, clothing, takeaway food containers, you know, those nice shiny surfaces where it doesn't soak into the cardboard and make it soggy. Coffee cups, cosmetic, sunscreen, dental floss, contact lenses, non-stick cookware. Then they leak into the soil, water and air. So this was in the Sydney Morning Herald, and anyone who's on Stan, you can watch the documentary, How to Poison a Planet. It was the Australian journalists that have blown the whistle on this, and Anthony Albanese is considering mounting a legal case against the 3N manufacturers. So it's the Australian government suing them because Australia has dozens of these cancer clusters all around. The closest one I know of is Wreck Bay in Jarvis Bay area. But of course, it's not just the cancers. It affects all our systems.
And here we have a study where PFAS are found in breast milk at 2,000 times what is considered to be safe in drinking water. And since I did this slide, I discovered that the EPA, the Environmental Protection Authority in the US, has stated that there is no safe level of PFAS at all.
The problem with toxins? Toxins cause oxidative stress. Oxidative stress causes inflammation, and then you get chronic inflammation from oxidative stress, and that causes tissue and organ damage. And this is how neurodevelopment is affected. 99% of children tested show positive to oxidative stress. Having said that, the vast majority of autistic children are never tested because they, if they're going to see just a standard medical doctor, they don't see it as a metabolic problem. So all the entire medical profession does not acknowledge the integrative medicine and natural therapies. And the guy that presented us with this information, Dr. William Walsh, said actually the 1% that don't test positive, it was probably a lab error. And he gave us a whole talk on lab errors, and there's more than you think. So it's always, if you're not sure about a test result, it's always not a bad idea to get it retested or done with a different lab. We've experienced that ourselves recently with a persistent test that didn't make test result that didn't make sense. Went to the GP, said, let's try a different lab. Bingo, negative. Amazing. The other thing is that the idea of realising that the systems of autistic children are inflamed explains the comorbidities that you get, the seizures and the gut dysfunction and the immune issues, allergies, anxieties. It starts to make sense when you think of the impact of the toxic load on their systems. So the guy, William Walsh, we'll talk about him a little bit more. He's done like hundreds of thousands of tests on the urinary organic acid tests. Right. Intense information. Have a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and talk about risk factors.